Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today, we'll be talking about electric vehicles in our Electric Vehicles 101 webinar. And who are we? So we are Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization based in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And our mission is to empower consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. So we do that through both advocacy and programmatic work. And today is one of our programs through the Drive Green team. My name is Ezra Messenger, and I am the Electric Vehicle Program Associate, and I will be giving this presentation today. And I am joined by my colleague, Devin, and I will ask her to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Devin Delibro. I am the Electric Vehicle Program Coordinator, and I will be here in an assisting role, just answering questions in the background. So I will go off camera for most of the time, and if you have any questions, I'll either chat them to you or we'll talk more at the end.
Perfect. Thank you. So we'll just go over some quick Zoom basics. So like Devin said, she will be answering questions in the chat. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A and we'll get to it both in to type an answer, and then we'll take a break a few times throughout the webinar to answer any questions. We have muted everyone. So again, please put your questions in the chat. And we are recording this webinar. So at the end, when the webinar is finished, we will be sending out the slide deck so you can view any of the links within the presentation. And then we will also put a recording of the webinar on our YouTube page, and we will share that link as well. So we're going to begin. First, we'll start with why electric cars, and there are many reasons to make the transition to switch to an electric car, and that's why we started the Drive Green team, which was established back in 2016, and that had the mission, and it does have the mission to educate consumers about the benefits of electric vehicles and to provide a platform through which you, as a consumer, can buy an EV. So through our current platform, dealers can post deals and offer discounts. But since COVID, the car market has drastically changed and we have also evolved. So while we still run that platform and you can still get EV deals through our site, our main focus is now on education and outreach, like this webinar that we're giving today. So we do both webinars online and in-person events. Now, what are some of the benefits of EVs? Well, at least for us, most importantly, they are better for the environment. Additionally, they help reduce both health risks and harmful pollution. EVs are more efficient than their gas-powered counterparts. They're also cheaper to charge and maintain, plus they have less moving parts to break or repair. And lastly, they are fun and fast. Now we're going to go through each of these and get more in depth with it. So first, the environment. EVs are better for the environment because they produce less grams of CO2 emissions per mile. And here we have three bar graphs, and these represents the grams of CO2 emissions within New England specifically based on the energy mix that we have in the New England states. So for just a typical gas car on the left, this roughly 30 miles per gallon, it's just like a typical sedan, will produce 381 grams of CO2 emissions per mile. So this is quite a bit of carbon being released into the atmosphere. Now, if you move to the middle, we have a plug-in hybrid. For those of you who don't know, a plug-in hybrid is like a mix between both a gas car and an electric car. So it has a traditional ICE, like an internal combustion engine, and additionally, it has an electric engine. Most plug-in hybrids can go between 20 and 40 miles on all electric. And then once the battery runs out, it will transition to the gas and will continue to take you on longer journeys. So a plug-in hybrid will produce roughly 176 grams of CO2 emissions per mile. And as you can see, this is definitely better than a gas car, but it's not the best. But for those of you who don't want to make that full commitment to a full EV, this could be a really good stepping stone. And then on the right, we have a battery electric car. Now, it does on average produce 96 grams of CO2 emissions per mile, but that depends on where you source your electricity from. So for those of you in attendance today, if you have solar panels on your roof or you live in a municipality that has 100% renewable energy, then those grams of CO2 could be reduced all the way to zero. It really just depends. Now, if we take a macro look at greenhouse gas emissions in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, we can see that the transportation sector is the largest emitter of CO2 and greenhouse gases in both states. So on the left in Massachusetts, we have data from last year, 2023, and that big like greenish color on the left in that pie chart represents the transportation sector. That is 36% of all CO2 emissions come from driving cars. Now, this can be from a personal vehicle like the car you take to work, but it could also be from transportation using major trucks, like those big shipping trucks. Uh, Thankfully, we have actually seen a reduction though. So the last time that we had the GHG emissions from Massachusetts in 2020, the percentage from transportation was roughly 40%. So it was even a larger segment of this pie chart. Thankfully, because of the initiatives that the state is taking and us and other nonprofits, we have been able to shrink some of the transportation emissions in Massachusetts. And then on the right, we have the data from Rhode Island. Rhode Island doesn't update their GHG emissions stats as quickly as Massachusetts. So our most recent data is from 2020. But again, you can see transportation at 38% is the largest segment of the pie chart. So it's really, really important for us to reduce, if we want to reduce overall emissions, we have to reduce transportation emissions. And one great way to do that is through transitioning to electric vehicles. Now, I know a lot of people who are concerned about the environment question whether EVs are still environmentally friendly because of the battery mining and the battery manufacturing. And while yes, we are fully aware and acknowledge that the battery does contribute to some environmental degradation and does cause its own CO2 emissions, there is still a reduction in the total life cycle of the vehicle. So on the left, we compare a gasoline car, just an average car with 32 miles per gallon. And in the middle, we have an electric car with a 300-mile range, which is roughly average. And you can see that even with that the additional emissions from the battery manufacturing, which is represented in that blue segment, there's still 52% reduction over the entire life cycle of both cars. Now, EVs will actually reach parity with a traditional gas car after about roughly 1 year of driving. So while both will have roughly the same emissions because of the battery manufacturing during the first year, because electric cars don't emit any tailpipe emissions, a gasoline car's life cycle emissions will continue to rise while an electric car does not. Now, this is even more dramatic when you compare a gasoline truck with 19 miles per gallon on the right to an electric truck all the way to the far right, there's a 57% reduction. So while battery manufacturing is not the best for the environment over the entire life cycle, an EV is still better and produces less emissions. Now, additionally, EVs are better for public health. Because the transportation sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, it leads to worse air quality and both amplifies and accelerates a wide range of health risks and disparities. And the burden of this unhealthy air includes asthma attacks, heart attacks, stroke, lung cancer, and even premature death. So if you take if you take the electricity generation into account that powers the EV, and even if it comes from dirty sources such as coal, EVs are still cleaner and better for the environment because they don't have any tailpipe emissions. Again, like I said, climate change is a public health threat. And we actually sourced some of the data that we talk about here from the ALA, which is the American Lung Association. And every year they come out with a report called Driving to Clean Air. And it talks about the health benefits of zero emission cars and electricity. And they find that a transition to 100% zero emission new passenger vehicle sales by 2035, coupled with non-combustion electricity generation, would yield tremendous public health benefits across the United States. And I know I said this at the beginning, but I do want to reiterate that we will be sharing the slide deck. So if you are interested in reading more about this study, after this presentation, I will email the slides to you and you can click the link right here. Now, additionally, the ALA supports aggressive electrification mandates like ACC2, which requires all cars by 2035 to have zero emissions. And Massachusetts has signed on to this, and Rhode Island did as well, starting this January, actually. So you can eventually know that in many different states in the United States, you will eventually only be able to buy an EV car. So it's really good to get ahead of that now and to purchase one so you know how they work, especially before there's a huge demand once everyone has to buy one. Another reason EVs are better or superior to internal combustion engine vehicles or gas cars because they're far more efficient. So what is efficiency? It determines how much energy is being used to complete a task. So the higher the efficiency, the less waste it produces and the more energy you get out of it. So on the right of this chart here, we have just some popular gas cars that we picked, and you can see their MPG, which is how we measure efficiency. So it's miles per gallon. For example, a Subaru Outback, which is like a hatchback SUV crossover, will get about 26 miles per gallon. So these are not very efficient vehicles. And most of the gas that you put into the car does not actually get it or power it to go down the road. There's a huge amount of energy loss. And it's a very inefficient way to power, to use as a form of transportation. In the middle, we have some bars that are both blue and orange. And these are plug-in hybrids. Like I talked about before, they have both a gas engine and an electric engine. And you can see the efficiency is already increasing. We'll talk about the Toyota Prius Prime, which is that tallest bar. So running just on gas, the car will get 127 miles per gallon. I mean, 52 miles per gallon. And running just on electricity, the car will get 127 mpge, which is miles per gallon equivalent. And that's how we measure the efficiency of non-gasoline cars. On the left, we have five all like pure EVs, 100% battery electric vehicles. And you can see the Hyundai Ioniq 6 is the most efficient vehicle on this list and will get 140 miles per gallon equivalent. So electric vehicles are far more efficient, roughly 70%, up to even 100% of the electricity that you put into the car will actually power it down the road. Now, an additional reason that EVs are beneficial, they have lower fuel costs. So we've done a lot of math here. I'm constantly updating this chart. We have it on our website. And you can also, once I share the slides, you can go to our fuel cost page and click the link and you can see exactly how we calculate this. And you can do the math based on your own like fuel cost and where you source your electricity from. But here in New England, we focused on the three largest utility companies. So in Massachusetts, we focus on National Grid and Eversource. And then in Rhode Island, we focus on RI Energy, which is very cheap, actually. So for Massachusetts and National Grid, you will spend currently 34 cents per kilowatt hour. And these prices are valid until July. And what does that come out to? About 10 cents per mile of electricity to power an electric car. Now, if you compare that to current gas prices, which gas has gone down, so this used to be a little bit more the change was a bit more noticeable. Gas now costs $3.18, at least the average gallon. And that comes out to 0.125 cents per mile. So if you have National Grid as your utility company, you're saving about 2.5 cents. If you have Eversource, you're going to save about 4 cents. And if you're in Rhode Island, you are going to save 5.5 cents. So that's per mile, and that definitely adds up over one trip, over a month, and especially over a year. So many ways to save money with an electric car. An additional way to save money, EVs cut maintenance costs and repair costs in half. And if you want to read more about this and see where we source this from, you can click the link in the bottom right when I share the slides for the Consumer Reports study that shows this. But ultimately, EVs have far fewer moving parts in their engine compared to a traditional combustion engine. There's no transmission, there's no spark plugs. There's a lot less things that can break, and there's a lot less things that you have to maintain, which again just means more money in your pocket that you're saving. And it's very unlikely, this is a big fear people bring up to us a lot, but it's very unlikely that you'll ever have to replace the battery. And all major manufacturers have either an 8-year or a 10-year warranty on their battery. So for the entire time that you're going to own this car, it's covered by warranty. And if, let's say, something did happen, they'll replace it. But for most people, it's not an issue. Additionally, these batteries are very expensive and they're full of really important minerals, and they don't just get thrown out. If you kept an EV for a very long time, that battery would eventually, if it does get to the point where it's no longer usable after 20 years, it will be recycled, and it will be recycled, and you won't just be giving away this battery for free. Like, they'll be reusing all of those minerals and metals inside of that battery for something else, so it's not wasted. And then lastly, regenerative braking protects the brakes. Now, if you don't know what regenerative braking is, it uses magnets in the wheel well, and it then using those magnets and not the brakes, you're able to slow down the car. And then the energy that is collected from slowing down the car with those batteries is transferred from those magnets is transferred back to the battery to help replenish power. If you drive, there's different settings to regenerative braking. It's also known as one pedal driving because you just take your foot off of the gas pedal and those magnets are engaged instead of using 2 feet or 1 foot to then hit the brake pedal. There's different settings, so it can go like very strong regenerative braking. So the second your foot lifts out, like you will very quickly brake. But because of that, you don't actually have to use the brake pads, or at least very rarely use the brake pads. You can, of course, still, especially in like an emergency situation. But most of our EV ambassadors that we work with share that over the 5-10 years that they've owned their EVs, they've never had to replace their brake pads. So that's just another way that you save money. And it's another way that you can collect some power back and refill the battery, which again means you don't have to charge as much. So it's a win-win. Now, here's a really good chart from the Department of Energy, and it talks about scheduled maintenance cost. And it calculates this maintenance cost per mile. So on the very left, that like 10 cents you see is how much it costs per mile for an ICEV, which is an internal combustion engine vehicle. And then we have a hybrid, which is a little bit less at 9 cents, a plug-in hybrid, a PHEV, also 9 cents, but all the way to the right at only 6 cents, which is a 40% reduction. We have a BEV, which is a battery electric vehicle. And you can see there's no transmission service, spark plugs that have to be replaced, oxygen sensors or timing belts or fuel filters, or there's engine air filters. So there's a lot less that needs to be repaired or needs to be replaced. So it's just less to worry about, less to pay for. And lastly, they're really fun to drive. I think some people who have never been in an EV have shared with me, my own family members have shared that they think it's like a golf cart. But if you've ever driven one, you will know that is the furthest thing from the truth. EVs have instant torque. They are incredibly fast. They have very high horsepower. Even the smaller, cheaper models are really, really sporty and quick to drive. So if you have not driven one, I recommend taking a test drive because EVs are very, very fun to drive. Now we're going to talk about range and charge, which is like another topic that people have come to us with concerns about, but we're going to alleviate any fears that you might have. So first, range. We're going to talk about different electric car ranges and compare that to some plug-in hybrids. Now, I know people are often, they feel like a bit nervous that an EV will not be able to cover the entire range that they need to go maybe long distances or to work. But for the majority of people, a full battery that's charged to 100% will cover your entire week's worth of going to work, going to the grocery store, and running any other errands. And if you do take a longer journey and if you travel long distances, the we'll talk more about this later, but the government is increasing infrastructure spending to build out an entire charging network over all major highways. So it really is a fear of the past. If you look all the way to the right, you can see the orange and blue graphs, and those are plug-in hybrids. So we'll just start with the tallest. The Toyota Prius Prime is going to get an amazing, like a really incredible 644 gas range, and then an additional 444 all-electric range. So that car can go almost 700 miles, which is pretty incredible. And if you are able to daily charge and you don't drive more than 44 miles a day, then you can go strictly all gas. Now, if you want to make the jump all the way to an EV, if we look at the Hyundai Ioniq 6, you're going to get 361 mile range. And that's really, really incredible. The Hyundai Ioniq 6 is a really great car to look into. It's not very expensive, and that range can get you pretty far. That's further than I drive a Jeep, actually, and it's much further than that. Another example is the Tesla Model 3 on the left with 333 miles. And yeah, so most of these cars will cover your daily commute. Now, what does charging look like? There's a few things we have to go over because there's a few different types of charging ports and there's a few different types of charging levels. So we'll start on the left with a level 1. Now, that is just a regular charger that you plug right into an outlet, like where you would plug in your cell phone. You can do this anywhere. It's not the fastest way to charge, but it works for people who don't travel too much and don't need to charge that quickly and who don't want to pay to have a level 2 charger put into their house. Or if you're just somewhere and all you have access to is just a regular outlet. So level 1 is 110 volt, and that'll do we call it trickle charging. It'll provide between 2 and 6 miles of range per hour. So if you leave it overnight, you will definitely get quite a bit of range. But again, it's not the fastest. A level 2 charger is the fastest that you can have installed at your own house, and that runs on a 220 volt. So something that's like the similar outlet to an electric dryer or major appliance like a refrigerator. And that'll charge much faster. Again, it depends on the output of both the amount of electricity that the outlet can handle plus how fast the car itself can handle. So it does depend, but that can provide between 11 and 54 miles of range per hour. And then lastly, we have DC fast charging. Now, this is like the very, very fast charge that that you'll find in public. Level 1 and 2 runs on a J1772 port, which you can see on the left, and a DC fast charging runs on the J1772 combo or the CHAdeMO. The CHAdeMO is not very popular anymore. It's currently only in 2 vehicles and it's being phased out. So if you are looking for an electric car and you're in the market, I would be a little weary about a vehicle that has a CHAdeMO port. But this can charge really fast, like I said. It can provide roughly on average 90 miles in 30 minutes, but there's some new cars that are currently out that can charge almost 200 miles in 30 minutes. So it does depend. Um, it can, the, the average is between 50 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts, but I've seen higher. Again, it depends on how fast your car can handle charge, and then how much power the DC fast charging station has. And ultimately, whichever number is lower is how fast the car will charge. Now, there's one other type of charger, and this one is very popular, the North American Charging Standard, also known as NACS, also known as Tesla charging. And this port that you see pictured here works for all three levels of charging. Um, there's also, as you can see on the map, 20,000 Tesla supercharger ports across the United States. So this is like a major charging network. And because of that, we have all these new partnerships that have been announced with major automakers and NACS. So these include Ford, Rivian, General Motors, which is Chevy, Cadillac, and GMC, Acura and Honda, Fisker, Mercedes. You can see the list. The list is actually much longer. All major automakers have now joined. Stellantis, which owns Jeep, Maserati, and Fiat, and Chrysler and Dodge, was a holdout, but they have now signed on too. So now all major automakers, starting in spring 2024, will be providing adapters for current owners. Some are providing for free and some are charging money. You can see there what the adapter looks like. And then starting in 2025, they're going to be rolling out all of their EVs that they will be making, will come equipped with that NACS port and not the J1772, which was on the previous slide. And for those of you who will be charging on the go, perhaps you don't have a garage to charge at or you travel long distances, it's very easy to charge on the go. You can see we have pictured here from PlugShare, which is a really great app that shows you all different chargers, and it's not affiliated with any particular charging station, so it can be a good resource to see the entire network. The green represents level 2 chargers, and the orange represents level 3 or DC fast charging. Western Massachusetts on the left does not have as many chargers. It's not as populated as an area, but we are trying to increase funding within the state, and we're working with the state to push forward increased funding to build more. And then Eastern Massachusetts, especially around Boston, has plenty of EV chargers. And Boston is now trying to, they're working on an initiative to have charging within, I believe, 15 minutes of every resident. So charging infrastructure is a work in progress, but it is always increasing, and there is billions and billions of dollars being going towards funding to improve the infrastructure. Here we have both the Cape and Rhode Island, and you can see what charging looks like. Rhode Island is a bit sparse on the western half, but all around Providence and Warwick and on the East Bay, there is plenty of stations. And we've created this very helpful guide to walk you through the process. The majority of EV drivers charge at home, either with a household outlet, which is level 1, or with a level 2 charging station. It's super easy. It takes 10 seconds to plug in, and this eliminates any time that you would ever have to spend at a gas station. So very convenient. If you have an EV and you need some guidance on what kind of charger to buy or how to navigate the process of installing an EVSC, then you could check out our guide. Again, we will be sharing the slide, so you can just click here. It's really easy to install a level 2 charging station at home. If you already have a 240 volt outlet, then all you have to do is buy the charging station and hire an electrician to plug it in and make sure your home can handle the extra load. Otherwise, the electrician just has to install a 240 volt outlet wherever you plan to charge, most likely your garage, which is a very easy and standard job. Including labor, the electrician's time, and all the parts, it usually costs about $1,000. And our installing electric vehicle charging at home guide can also help you think about whether you should rely mostly on level 1 or whether you should pay for level 2. We talk about how to pick a charging station, different things that will affect the cost of installing that charging station. So I recommend checking it out. And for those of you who live in an apartment or a condo, we also have resources for you. We have a guide for providing information on what to talk about with your apartment or condo managers. And we also include different incentives that are available. So recommend checking it out. Now we're going to talk about the different incentives, the incentives that are available both federally and then later on within Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So the Clean Vehicle Credit, which was signed through the IRA and has been around for a little while, will provide up to $7,500 on eligible models that meet certain battery and assembly requirements. Currently, this is valid and funded through 2032, and it is for battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid, and fuel cell EVs. We haven't talked much about fuel cell, and we're not going to talk much about fuel cell because there really aren't many places to charge a fuel cell EV within New England. So we believe in battery electric and plug-in hybrids here. This credit can be claimed at point of sale, and we will talk about that a little bit more in a few slides. And it also must be purchased from an IRS registered dealership, which we will also get into. There are some income requirements that you do have to meet. For joint filers, you have to make less than 300,000. If you're head of household, it's 225,000, and individual filers must make less than 150,000. And when I share the slides, you can click the link and we have information from the IRS's website. And then here are the 3 vehicle requirements. So the final assembly location must be within North America. The MSRP must be less than 80,000 for SUVs, vans, and pickup trucks, and 55,000 for sedans and hatchbacks. And then there are 2 battery requirements. One pertains to the minerals and one pertains to the components. If only one is met, you get 3,750. And if both are met, you get 7,500. And unfortunately, if neither are met, you will get $0. Now, it's much easier to just go to the list, which we have here in the corner, and you can just view all the cars on the Department of Energy's website. I do want to stress, though, that you have to check with the dealer or the seller to determine the eligibility of the specific car that you're looking to buy, because not every version of a vehicle model that is eligible for the tax credit will necessarily qualify. And this is just because supply chains are very intricate and complicated. And while most cars are built to the correct standard on that list are built to the correct standard to receive the credit, not all of them will. So just check with the dealer. Now there's also a clean vehicle credit for used cars. And I believe this, yeah. There's a list of the manufacturers and models on the EPA's website, but almost every EV and plug-in hybrid is eligible. And that's because there's no battery requirement. So if the car isn't eligible new, it will most likely be eligible used. There is, the credit is for $4,000 or 30% of the sale price, whichever is lower. And the vehicle must be purchased from an IRS dealership. But this does include KeySavvy, which we've recently learned about. You can click there to learn more. But KeySavvy is like an online, kind of like a dealership middleman for individuals who are looking to sell their personal car, not through a traditional dealership. And then you, as the buyer, can purchase someone's car for sale. And because KeySavvy is registered with the IRS, you will be eligible for that $4,000 credit. You can't buy from just someone on the street, though. Like if your neighbor is selling a car not through KeySavvy, they just listed it through the classified, then you will not be eligible to get the credit. The car must be at least 2 years old and it must cost less than $25,000. That doesn't include things like taxes, but the final sale price includes anything that the dealership has tacked on. That is not required by law. So just be sure that that car, the final price does not cross that threshold. Otherwise, it will not be eligible. It also applies at the first resale after August 16th, 2022. So it's only for the second owner of the EV. So I just want to stress that when you do apply, if you do at a point of sale, they'll be able to tell you if the car is eligible or not, the dealership. There is a lower income threshold. So for joint filers, it's 150,000, and for individual filers, it's 75. Now, how do you claim the credit? So you can choose, starting in 2024, this January, you can choose to transfer that tax credit to an IRS registered dealership. So that would be at point of sale, and that credit would be instantaneous. Or you can take the credit when filing taxes, which is how it's been done pre-2024. So if you choose point of sale, you can receive that credit in cash. You can apply it to the down payment if you're using a loan, or you can apply that credit towards the cost of the EV if you are paying cash. If you decide to take at time of sale, you can access the rebate regardless of your tax liability. So if you did not pay, let's say, $7,500 in federal taxes in 2023, and you take the credit at point of sale, then you'll get the full amount. If you choose to take the credit when filing your taxes, then you can only claim up to your tax liability. So just that's important to know. Now, here's a dealership checklist that we've created, and I really want to stress that it's important to do this. We've had some people call, they purchased an EV, but they didn't follow this checklist, and unfortunately, they lost out on getting that credit. So one, you want to confirm that your expected income for that tax year, so last year, is under the required limit, which we spoke about. Next, you want to make sure that the dealership or the store you're working with has registered with the IRS on their energy credits online portal. You can do that by talking to a salesperson, but we recommend talking to a manager just to confirm. Next, you want to ask that salesperson to confirm via that energy credit online portal that the particular model and vehicle that you want to buy qualifies for the federal tax credit. Then, when you purchase, you want to receive a copy of the time of sale report that the dealer submitted and a copy of the confirmation from the IRS that shows a successful submission. Then, even if you took this credit at point of sale, when it comes time to file your taxes, you need to file Form 8936, even if you don't normally file your taxes. If you want to read if you want to read more about this or see more in-depth instructions, you can click the link, and that directs you to the IRS website. Now, there is an important leasing loophole. So the Inflation Reduction Act created a commercial vehicle tax credit, and that does not have those battery requirements or the same eligibility requirements as the clean vehicle credit. So a dealer, as a commercial entity, can claim that commercial tax credit when they acquire the vehicle from a manufacturer to lease. And because of that, you can get the full $7,500. So if there's a car that you really want and they don't qualify for purchase for the clean vehicle tax credit, you can see if they offer a $7,500 lease rebate, because that dealership is able to pass those commercial vehicle tax credit savings onto the consumer. So definitely look into it. I have been in the market for an EV for the past few months, and several dealerships that I've gone to have offered a $7,500 lease rebate. Now we're going to talk about state incentives. We're going to start first with Massachusetts because their program is much larger, and then we'll move to Rhode Island. So Massachusetts has More EV, which is their overarching program. And then within More EV are several sub-programs. So we'll start first with More EV Standard. This provides $3,500 for battery electric vehicles, but the total MSRP must be under $55,000. We have people ask, no, you cannot use this on plug-in hybrids, and no, if the MSRP is even $1 over, can't qualify. So just double check when you're purchasing. And this will cover both the purchase and at least a 36-month lease for an EV. You can, through More EV Standard, purchase that car both in and outside of Massachusetts. It's very easy to apply. You can either receive that rebate at a participating dealership when you purchase or lease, and we have the website here for More EV. If you go there, you can view the full list of all participating dealerships. Or option two, you can apply for a rebate after purchase or lease through an online application, and it's very simple and straightforward. More EV Used is very similar. It provides $3,500, but for, of course, as the name implies, a used battery electric vehicle. The car must cost less than $40,000, so it does have a lower MSRP cap limit. And unlike More EV Standard, to use More EV Used, you must purchase at a licensed Massachusetts dealership. And we did recently find out that they do not consider Key Savvy a licensed Massachusetts dealership, so it must be a brick and mortar store. And this is retroactive to November 10th, 2022. And the vehicle must not have gotten a More EV rebate in the past 3 years. There are some income requirements for this program, unlike More EV Standard. So you must either participate in a list of income qualified programs, which More EV lists on their website, but includes things like SNAP and Medicaid, or you must have a modified adjusted gross income under the limit. So it's 150,000 for married, 112,500 for head of household, and 75,000 for single filers and everyone else. To apply, you can either go to an authorized point of sale participating dealership, but you must do a pre-qualification on More EV's website, or you can do post-purchase online at moreev.org. More EV Plus is an additional rebate. So it's an adder for low-income drivers that provides an additional 1,500. You must participate in an income qualified program, which are listed on More EV's website. You can use this for both More EV Standard or More EV Used, and it's also retroactive to November 2022. You apply the same way, either point of sale with at a participating dealership with pre-qualification or post-purchase online. More EV Trucks is a newer program, and the truck must meet some of the following requirements. It must be electric or fuel cell. It must weigh between 6,000 and 10,000, or have a gross weight between 8,500 and 10,000, and has a maximum MSRP of 80,000. Now, More EV Trucks is open to several different entities beyond just individuals. So, of course, Massachusetts residents, but additionally, private businesses, nonprofits, educational institutions, and different governments and departments. Now, this program offers a very substantial $7,500 for Class 2 pickup trucks. And here are just some examples of the Ford E-Transit, which is the truck in the back, the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is the truck in the front, the blue truck, the Rivian R1T is the truck on the left, the Rivian R1S is the SUV on the right, and not pictured is the Chevy Silverado EV. We actually had someone share with us that they were able, the Massachusetts resident, he was able to get a $50,000 Ford F-150 Lightning with $7,500 federal tax credit, $7,500 More EV truck credit for a total savings of $15,000. And he got this brand new truck for under $35,000. There's an additional program, it's More EV Trade-In, and this will provide $1,000 on top of the other programs. To qualify, you must be a resident in Massachusetts. And when you purchase or lease the eligible EV, you must trade in a qualifying internal combustion or gas engine vehicle at the same time. You can then stack this program with More EV Standard, More EV Used, or More EV Plus. Cool. And there's a few trade-in eligibility requirements. So the vehicle must be inspected and have a report from MA Vehicle Check. It cannot be a plug-in hybrid or a hybrid. It must be at least 12 years old. It must have some market value, and this would be demonstrated by having trade-in value on the purchase or lease agreement with the dealership. It must be traded into a Massachusetts dealership at the time of purchase. It also must be registered to the applicant or the applicant's immediate family for at least 2 years prior to the trade-in date, and it must weigh less than 8,500 pounds. And because that was a lot of information, we created this chart here, this table that shows everything very simplified. So for More EV Standard, the rebate is 3,500. If you're eligible for More EV Plus, you get an additional 1,500. And if you trade in, you get an additional 1,000 for a possible total of $6,000. For More EV Trucks, you can get a possible total of $9,000 in rebates. And for More EV Used, you can get $6,000. And just to emphasize, this is only for Massachusetts residents, not for someone out of state who buys in Massachusetts. Rhode Island does not have, their program's not as complicated. So their program is called Drive EV and Drive Plus. It's very simple to explain, so I'll go over it quickly. There's a price cap of 60,000 for new cars and 40,000 for used. You can apply online up to 120 days after purchase, and you must purchase within Rhode Island at a dealership or select Massachusetts dealerships, which they have listed on their website. For fuel cell and battery electric, you can get 1,500 new. For Drive EV Plus, an additional 1,500 for a total possible rebate of 3,000. For a new plug-in hybrid, you can get $1,000. If you are eligible for Drive EV Plus, which is the low income program, it's an adder program, you can get a total of 2,500. For used vehicles, for fuel cell and battery electric, you can get 1,000. If you're eligible for Drive EV Plus, you can get 1,500 for a total rebate of 2,500. And for a used plug-in hybrid, you can get 750. If you're eligible for Drive EV Plus, 1,500 for a total of $2,250. And to see which programs and what income qualifies for Drive EV Plus, you can go to the Drive EV website, which we have hyperlinked right there. And I do want to just recommend using our Drive Green electric vehicle shopping tool. So here's just a picture of what it looks like. You can put what state you live in, whether Massachusetts or Rhode Island, and it will show you the base MSRP for the vehicle, how much the car will receive for the federal tax credit. This information is incorrect for the ARIA. It no longer receives the 7,500, but it's just an example. What the car will receive for state rebates, if it does qualify for any, and then what the total price would be after any incentives. Additionally, we have, and you can narrow down by you can filter by vehicle type. We list the range, the drivetrain, the vehicle's efficiency, the battery size. And for those who really want to get into the nitty gritty, we have the charging speed for level 2 and DC fast charging. We also have the speed of miles gained per hour and the different plug types. So it's a really invaluable resource, even if you don't look to because we do have deals listed on here with different local dealerships. Even if you don't use it for that, it can be a great way to narrow down which EV works for you. And if you have any questions, I am, again, Ezra Messenger, and here's my email. And we're going to go, and I'm going to ask Devin if there's any questions that she wants to highlight or if there's anything that still is unanswered.
So we just got a handful of questions that are answered, that are already answered. I would definitely invite people to ask more questions now if they're confused on anything. And I can maybe highlight some of the things I touched upon that I already answered. So one question is asking if we're advocating for more free access public charging stations at like supermarkets, libraries, or malls. We are advocating. Our advocacy team does work on getting more charging infrastructure installed generally and advocates for that. We cannot determine whether or not that is free to the public. That is up to the individual site host, so that mall, that supermarket, that library, whatever, on whether or not they charge money for people to use their charging stations. There is funding coming through all the time for different charging programs. So specifically in Rhode Island, I'm in touch with the folks there who are in charge of the NEVI funds, which basically means that these funds are federal dollars that are going to be put towards charging infrastructure. So right now in Rhode Island, they are almost done with phase 1, installing some DC fast chargers in Westerly and Warwick. And they are looking actually for feedback for phase 2, which would be not necessarily on the highway corridor, but it would be like at businesses or parks or whomever wants to get charging. The same process is happening in Massachusetts. So unfortunately, I just don't know where they are with their planning and their construction of charging sites, but I believe they're still in phase 1 because, let's face it, Massachusetts is quite a bit bigger than Rhode Island and needs to install more charging units for the phase 1 project.
There was a clarification for that question about free access. They meant free access to park, as in not a parking garage, but they fully expect to pay for the electricity. But there are many places you can charge for free in public parking lots. So
yeah, there's lots of places you can go for free to park or otherwise or to charge. something I also included in my original answer is to use an app called PlugShare, um, which is crowdsourced, so it has all the different networked charging stations on there. And because it is crowdsourced, it'll tell you anything you want to know pretty much about that charging station. People will give feedback, so it'll tell you like if there's usually a line, if maybe it's in disrepair, if it's like close to good shopping or good, coffee shop, whatever. But it also tell you um, if if there's any parking fees or if there's a fee to charge.
There's a new question that just came in. Did we cover dual motors? Are they safer than they were? How is access to and how much are charging stations on major highways? We need to drive 550 miles one day.
Okay. Well, I'll take the second half of that question first. So how is access to and how much are charging stations on major highways? Um, so charging stations vary from station to station as far as price. So kind of what I said, similar to the answer to the last question, I would definitely check on PlugShare to see what your normal route is like. You could also use an app called a Better Route Planner that works really well. Or sometimes cars have really good in-car navigation that will help you figure out charging stations that are on your route, but it really just depends on the car because some EV owners tell me that some are better than others. So just do your checking. And with the NEVI funds that I mentioned, that those came out of the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which is something that Ezra mentioned earlier. So that means that there are going to be level 3 or DC fast chargers every 50 miles along main like highways within the United States. Like that's what the goal is. So every state is getting a pot of money to make sure that happens, and those charging stations have to be within a mile of the highway itself. So there, if it's not built now, it will be soon. I don't know exactly where you drive, but just know that that is uh, out there, and there are also resources to check now, now to see if there's anything. Also, I would say that now that more cars are going to have access to the Tesla Supercharger network, that opens up a lot of charging and fast charging for folks who previously wouldn't have it because previously um, a big reason to get a Tesla was their infrastructure and it was just proprietary to Tesla at that time, but now it's going to be open to a lot of other people. I don't really know how to answer this dual motors question. We have like all-wheel drive cars that we have that are all electric, and we have four-wheel drive. Ezra, I think you might have a better answer on that one.
I'm not sure about the safety aspect in question because I suppose there was maybe news about dual motors being unsafe. I don't know. I didn't hear that. A lot of EVs are dual motor, especially in New England because of all-wheel drive. So they have two separate motors. It's important to know that if you do get an EV with all-wheel drive, I know you mentioned that you drive 550 miles in one day. When there's dual motors, the range does decrease compared to just a single motor, a front wheel drive or a rear wheel drive EV because it's still one battery, but now it has to charge two motors. So just keep that in mind. As far as if they're safer than they are, I have not heard of any safety issues with any all-wheel drive EVs. So I can't speak on that. Sorry.
And I would say that excuse me, if you're interested in looking at dual motor cars, you can go on our website, greenenergyconsumers.org/drivegreen. We have our shopping tool, and you can filter by drivetrain, so you can see, all the all-wheel drive cars that are on there if you'd like.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to mark that as answered. And
Any other questions? Sit here for a few more seconds.
Okay.
All right, well,
we do have some events coming up. It is Earth Month, and this is part of our Earth Month programming, this EV 101, and we do have a few more. Yes, I do see your question. The recording will be made available after this webinar. I'm going to upload it to YouTube, and I will email everyone who registered both a link to that YouTube recording and all of the slide deck. So you can click any of the links in here that we talked about. As far as upcoming events for Earth Month, Tuesday, April 16th at night, that's going to be at 7 p.m. We're doing Save Money on Electric Cars in Massachusetts. So if you live in Massachusetts and you want to learn more specifically about different incentives for both the EV and charging, it could be a great resource. And then Wednesday, the following day, April 17th at 12 p.m., I will be presenting Charged Up with Devin, and we'll talk about everything you need to know about EV charging. So that might also be helpful for some of you who had questions about charging. If you want to know more about our events, you can click the specific events listed, or you can go to our website /events and see what's coming up. And lastly, we are a nonprofit. So if you agree with our mission and you want to help fund some of our programmatic work and some of our advocacy, then we do ask that if you can take some time today to go to our website and donate whatever you're able to. We do a lot of our funding comes from people like you who make donations, and it allows us to continue to help educate the public and to advocate for both Massachusetts and Rhode Island to increase, different low carbon initiatives. So if you're able to, thank you. Thank you also for attending. If you want, you can join our Drive Green Facebook group where we talk with different EV owners about their experiences, and you can ask questions to help make the transition. You can follow us on Instagram, you can sign up for our Drive Green newsletter, and if you're willing, you can sign the pledge that your next car will be electric. So thank you all so much, and we're going to end the meeting. Just one second.